Thoughts are not part of the physical world, since thoughts are in their nature non-physical. Now, this may seem like a normal, everyday sentence, which it is, but it is also an example of begging the question, which is a logical fallacy, also known as the chicken or the egg argument, and it actually stems from the Aristotelian phrase meaning assume the conclusion, and it has a formal definition from Merriam-Webster, which states to ignore a question under the assumption it has already been answered. Now, this fallacy is commonly used today in discussions, in arguments, in debates, and people, they don't realize when they're using it, but they also don't realize the effect that it has on their conversation. So throughout my research, with multiple sources, multiple articles, I am very confident that my speech will not only succeed in providing you with knowledge on this topic, but it will also help you understand the logical issues of begging the question and how to avoid using it in your future arguments. So just to preview some of my points, making assumptions without any proof, creating a never-ending circle, and it cannot increase our knowledge. These are all liabilities or factors that begging the question causes or creates. So let's just start with the first point, making assumptions without any proof. For this point, I'm going to use two examples from Texas State University and just break them down. So the first one is, of course, smoking causes cancer. The smoke from cigarettes is a carcinogen. Now, for those of you who don't know, a carcinogen is actually an agent that promotes cancer. So when you kind of re-say the sentence, it's really saying, of course, smoking causes cancer. The smoke from cigarettes promotes cancer. So the claim being assumed is also the argument here. So there really isn't any proof, any evidence. They're just rewording the claim. And they are the same thing. So the next example is the rights of the minority are every bit as sacred as the rights of the majority, for the rights have no greater value than those of the minority. Now, again, there's no proof. They are basically taking the first part of the sentence and rewriting it again. So when it says the rights of the minority are every bit as sacred as the rights of the majority, and then the majority's rights have no greater value than those of the minority, you just said that, you just flipped it. The claim is also the argument. So when you lack justification, it really makes your argument seem weak, and it increases the chances of others disapproving it. So you really need some good evidence other than just restating your claim to get your point across. And this leads me to my next topic, which is creating a never-ending circle. Now, to start, I'm going to use a math equation, which is claim Y assumes X is true, therefore X is true. So basically, X is true because X is true, or X equals X. Now, this goes back to begging the question because the claim assumes the argument. So they are one and the same. And when this happens, it creates a never-ending loop or cycle that you will not get out of. Another model from Fallacy Files is the P equals C model. So assume that P means proposition and C means conclusion, and now also assume that they are equal to each other. So when the conclusion is just the proposition rewritten, then the conclusion results in you returning to the proposition. So it's like a never-ending circle, and there's no progress made to any of this, and it just keeps repeating over and over and over. So this model does a great job of actually leading me into my final point, which is incapable of increasing our knowledge. Now I'm going to use a quote from Fallacy Flies, which states, begging the question is a validating form of argument. That is, every argument that begs the question is valid. So as you can see, unlike most fallacies, begging the question is actually a legit argument when stating things. You can actually use it, but the problem with it is there won't be any knowledge learned because, again, it goes back to the never-ending circle. You're never going to get out of it. You're just going to repeat the same thing. So yes, you can argue it. Yes, you can fight with it, but there will be no space for any knowledge to be learned from it. Another quote from Fallacy Flies is, a viciously circular argument is one with a conclusion based ultimately upon the conclusion itself, and such arguments can never advance our knowledge. So, as I said before, begging the question, it is a formal way of validating oneself, but it really doesn't go beyond that, and there really is no room for growth or learning in the debate or the conversation. So now, just to pull it all together, begging the question, or when an argument assumes the truth of the conclusion, is a logical fallacy where support is absent, where a never-ending cycle forms, and where contributions are missing. I hope that this speech has helped you build an understanding on begging the question, the fallacy itself, and that you will be successful in having any conversations in the future to avoid it. So, thank you.